we have a great, can you hear me? If it's too loud, I'm kind of dynamic. So, but we have a great working relationship, and the team here at History Colorado is really doing some fantastic things in terms of creativity, and so I hope you will keep just coming back and pushing them to do more and more things. I wanted to talk, I do think you're a cult. You know why I think you're a cult is because when you go out into the other world that is not the creative world, you realize that the value of great ideas is in this room. It is the thing that fuels things. It's the thing that actually spurs great big things on, and that's what's in this room. And it doesn't matter, there's a huge age difference between me and you guys. So I'm 71 years old. And you are, what, I don't know, 18? I don't You guys are really young. And I'm going to talk to you not about me, big me, as my husband calls me, Miss Biggie Bazoo, or he calls me the money machine. I'm going to talk to you just kind of from the world I have lived in, and because you're living in a similar kind of world, it's just a different time period. And kind of show you some of the stuff, but I'm not trying to talk about the me part. I'm trying to share with you the not knowing part, the part where you kind of are becoming and you don't really get what it might be. And you kind of punch through this and that and misbehave and, do the wrong things, drink too much, say the wrong things, party, just those kinds of things that in business I experienced because I thought it might be a really good sharing time to do that. But I want to be sure you understand I'm not trying to talk about me and the success of the business I was in, which was. Because it wasn't easy and there was lots of imperfections that I promulgated myself. But I want you to start from the sense of cultness, because the idea that we are special people, I am not special in the same way you are. I was a fine art major. I always loved art and ideas, and I also have a master's degree in English. And so go figure what you're going to do with a background like that in 1968 when I got out of school. So I have this doofy slide presentation, which isn't really a slide presentation. It just keeps me on the page. And so I wanted to start with moi. And so this little person is all about ambition. And the idea that I wanted to lay off on you is that pioneering at its core, one has to have some sense of ambition. And the period that I came from was that period, that little pressed dress, because dresses got pressed, they didn't drip dry and become beautiful. I had pigtails, not braids. We all call them braids now. Pigtails, and do you see my hands are totally like I am the good little kiddo, doing what I'm supposed to do, and I am looking longingly. And I want you to know that is still me today. That is still me today. I still look longingly to what the possibilities are. And I want you to think about always be, as a creative person, being that person. Because that person is the opportunity, it's the potential, it's the pioneer, it's the ambition, it's all of that. And I'm not giving you a self-help thing, nothing like that. But it isn't for everyone. It is all about ambition and having this personal kind of ambition. So I put a couple of points together, which, can you even read them? I can barely read them, but number one, turmoil begets opportunities. And two, repetitive stuff gets boring. And when that happens, that's important to recognize that repetitive stuff is boring to the truly creative. And doing it your way is self-actualizing. We get to be who we get to be because of the choices we make about our way, not their way, not others' ways. Getting into what is our greatest creative self. And then 4, to thrive, it makes sense that you would survive. So making a business that can survive so that it could ultimately thrive, and then coming back to knowing yourself completely. And so I just want to kind of start with the first 2 points, turmoil begetting opportunity. So 1968. So how many people feel a little like it's turmoil out there now? You know, you feel it, you know, we're on the upswing. Not only is there turmoil in traffic, but there is turmoil in kind of the broader sense. Is that how people feel? I mean, we have jobs, we're self-motivated, we have lots of cranes in Denver, but there's just this feeling of turmoil. So 1968, I made a list of the things that were the most provocative about, and I didn't go online and say, show me all the 68s. I went from memory. So I went from, this is what I remember about 1968 when I graduated from college. So, or was just about, there were 500,000 guys who went to Vietnam. Very few nurses, all guys, 500,000, the very peak of that war. And so maybe some of you are watching the 18 hours of Vietnam War. Yeah. Martin Luther King died on April 4th. Robert Kennedy died on June 6th. In 1969, Woodstock happened in August. Kent State in 1970, 4 students killed by the National Guard on campus, and 4 million students on campuses in the entire country rioted. I was on a campus where our old main was taken over. Janis Joplin died of a drug overdose. Jimi Hendrix went away. It was huge music scene, huge envisioning of our world. And then MS Magazine, I am a charter member, that was founded by Gloria Steinem and the whole team of women in 1971. So that was my kind of period of entering into the world, not knowing what was going to happen. And so I grew up in State College, Pennsylvania. My dad was a Presbyterian minister, and boy, was I going to get out of State College. So I came out to Denver immediately upon my undergraduate degree, came out here looking for a job. And I worked for what was then the phone company, which is where I had $200, and I was going to have to go home if I didn't find a job. So a few people helped, but I mean, I was pretty much living at 14th and Pearl, right next to Colfax. I would run out of money, but you know, I needed to get a job. So I get a job at the phone company, and I go to town working in the business office, and I can still remember some of those phone numbers, and I can still remember who didn't pay their bills. So I do, and when I see them, I go, I called you in 1969. But anyway, so I did this job, and it was all women. We were all in the business office. And our guys here, you're going to have to hear a little of this, but it was, so I kept saying, I want to be in marketing, because in the center of the room were all these guys, and they were in marketing. I did not know what marketing was. I just wanted to be in it. And they said, no, only men are in marketing. So I thought, well, that's not working for me. That's not going to happen. So that's not going to happen part of that little person that we saw, that's the person part in you that I want you to hear, which is sometimes things aren't going to happen and one needs to kind of figure out a new way. So I went back to Penn State, got my master's in English. I had saved some money, worked in a little phone company office there, and hied myself off to Philadelphia because the one place, then I had $500 to look for a job, and I spent I don't know how long looking for a job. The only place I wanted to work was the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And that was the first place I applied, and I applied at insurance companies, I applied here and there. I thought, whoa, I am not going to get a job, and I'm going to have to go back home. You can feel how much I wanted to be somebody different from a Presbyterian minister's daughter in State College, Pennsylvania, at Penn State. So So I just stayed the course, and the last, I was finally almost out of money, and I responded to an ad in the paper, and it turned out that it was a development position at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And so I went out to interview, and I was just telling somebody this morning, well, I didn't tell them this, but I like clothes. I mean, this isn't totally it, but I like clothes a lot. And I had one suit. It was a beige suit and had a brown purse and had matching shoes. And I was paying for my suit on time. It was what they called layaway. So I paid $10 a month for that suit, and I had 10 months of payment. So it was like $100. And so I wore my little suit out to get that job. And I couldn't talk because I was so freaked out because you've seen what the Philadelphia Museum of Art looks like because the Rocky movie. I mean, you go up and it's like going to the Greek church. So the Greek, huge facility, amazing property. Anyway, so I go into Evan Turner's office, the director, and there is one of those Degas sculptures with the dancer with a little lace skirt, and I interviewed there for this development position and all his books and everything like that. And then I went to the board chair's home, which was the top floor of a hotel, and she had a Jackson Pollock right behind her as I'm interviewing in my $10 a month suit. Well, I got the job, and I know it was because I walked in with the suit and because I'd done some data work in my business office job here at the phone company, and they wanted to understand how to computerize. And so that was kind of why I got that job. I loved that job. I raised a boatload of money. Philadelphia was a very stratified society, so it was a wonderful society, but it was very stratified. So people lived in particular parts of town, and you've heard of the Main Line, maybe, or you've heard of, Chestnut Hill, different parts of the city, and it was who lived where and what religion you were and all of that stratification, but a brilliant city and a brilliant collection. But I came from State College, PA, and there at Penn State, everybody just came from all over the world to go to college. And so I felt like there in that environment, the one thing I could do would be mix them all up. And so whenever I had to seat at dinner, I would put people who would never sit together. I would never worry about whether they were going to throw stuff at each other. I just did it, and I I was young, I just felt so important. But I would open the doors. I felt like I opened the doors of the museum. So I raised a lot of money. And I remember the exact number. The first year was $335,000, and the second year was $435,000. I was making $8,400 a year. And I didn't really have a boss. I worked with consultants. So they brought in a fine fellow who I said, do you think I could make a little more money? I raised $335,000 last year and $435,000 this year. And he leaned back in his chair, and he said, I can go out on the street today and hire any junior leaguer for less money than you. And I am not denigrating junior league at all. I'm just saying that's what was said to me. I was kind of still that kiddo. That was me. I was, not very old. I was your age. I was 24, 25. So I went, that is not going to work in myself. I didn't say a peep to him. I just thought, I'm worth more than that in myself. And so I'm going to go and find some other opportunity. And because I was working in development work and raising funds, I knew the head of Campbell's Soup Company. I worked with the former mayor, Richardson Dilworth of Philadelphia. I worked with the head of Provident National Bank. I worked with all these people, and so I just quietly said, that's not going to be working. I need to go on. And ultimately, I got myself back to where? Denver Art Museum. exactly where I wanted to be. I wanted to live in Colorado. I wanted to have that opportunity. And so turmoil of the 60s was ugly, but the opportunity based on kind of saying, well, that's just not working for me. And guys, I know there's times where that same thing happens to you, where you go like, that's just not working to me. Somebody's not respectful to me. Somebody's not honoring the creativity that's in me. Somebody doesn't honor my accomplishment. Somebody doesn't say the thing that says, you could be anything. Well, that was, to me, what that turmoil begetting opportunities is all about. It's the point at which you go, my inside says, that's not working for me. I need to click off and move on. So the next point is repetitive stuff is boring. So I come to the Denver Art Museum and loved it. I mean, it was so different from Philadelphia. They had hundreds of thousands of visitors, young people. The colors were yellow and blue and red, and the building was very exciting. And so I came in and worked and developed almost a very strong foundation of relationships just because of being in the development work. We had the youngest board of trustees of any art museum in the country. I was the youngest art museum development director in any art museum in the country. It was all kind of formative, and Denver was formative. Furthermore, Philadelphia was a little dirty and Denver was really clean because we had a lot of good wind and we had a beautiful environment, but Denver was like nascent. It was becoming, and it just was such an extraordinary thing to experience. So people that you hear of today, like Philip Anschutz, they were on that board. Dana Crawford, who was the one who is so famous for having turned around Larimer Square, Dana hired me at the Art Museum. She was on the committee. All of these people have become kind of like the foundation. You see them. So that's another thought for all of you to be thinking about, is the people that you relate to, they are the ones over a long period of time. When you stay put in your territory, which I am, I'm 40 years here, you stay put in your territory, that's your foundation of relationships that allow you to be whatever you want to be. And I don't mean they're relationships you use, I think they're relationships you share. And you are part of what they're doing, and they're part of what you're doing. It's not about selling, it's more about relating. So I worked at the Art Museum here then for 7 years, and it was a really exciting and dynamic period. We were very effective, and then I started thinking, oh gosh, I've been doing fundraising for 10 years. 1 year it starts at $1 million, then it's 1.2, then it's 1.5, then it's 2, and it was like, it's the same swirl. And the repetition was starting to get to me, and a volunteer that I worked with walked in and said, hey, did you ever consider that maybe you might do something in advertising? And being an idea person at my core, it was like, wow, well, maybe that might be something interesting. So I went into a firm and began to work in advertising and PR. And I could translate many of the techniques that I had, because in fundraising, you're basically saying, for the good feeling I'm going to give you if you support History Colorado, I'm going to take your money. So your donation will make you feel good. So from an advertising standpoint, it's relatively easy to then begin to sell a tennis racket for Head Sports or skis for another client or whatever. And so that was kind of like the basic core of the beginnings of working in advertising in a more traditional advertising and PR firm. I worked in that firm and learned pretty much the traditional skill sets. And what occurred was I got a call from a search firm. And the search firm said, hey, there's this little agency in Boulder, it's 4 people, and maybe you might like to consider them. And I said, no, I'm Miss Biggie Bazoo. I don't need a job in a little agency over in Boulder. And then I see this ad. And it says, we believe we'll eventually find those companies who value uncommon advertising, but wouldn't it be easier if you just called and it's the messages in the bottle? Well, at that time, you guys can do this in a minute, what's on that screen right now. But that was a completely created image from, you didn't have computers that could do this stuff. You were just doing that somehow. I don't even know how it was done. And I looked at it, and it was that agency in Boulder. And I did not, Steve said I founded the agency. I didn't find that it was already in existence for 3 years. So it was Cooper Advertising. And so I thought, I'll go up there. Well, it was in the little yellow house. And, you know, I walked in the front door, and on the wall was Daniela Cooper. She was the founder. She was on the cover of Forbes magazine. So I'm like, 4 people, cover Forbes magazine. I'm stuck in my world in another firm, and maybe I should really consider this. So what happened was I began to think about moving on, and I moved quickly on, and took a portion of my retirement money and invested it in the firm, and then Daniela and I became partners. Well, what happened was that I read a book, and it was by Len Gross and somebody else. They were these old advertising guys. And they wrote a book that said how to run an advertising agency at a profit. And I thought, okay, here I am, Miss Nonprofit World, very experienced at nonprofit. And when you're in nonprofit, you're mission driven. You do not talk about money like trying to make money. You talk about money like trying to use money. And you don't think about it as profit. You don't think in those lines. Well, so I got a little form out of the book, and it was a cash report, and it would show you what amount of cash that you had. So this is my first week at work. So I fill out all the form, and it turns out that we are $55,000 upside down in our cash, which means more going out than coming in, and in a little firm, that's not working. And I'm like, that was more than my retirement money that I had. And I thought, holy smokes, this is real time. What do I do? There's 3 or 4 people here. And so we just began working on scrambling. Daniela was a heck of a saleswoman. I was not really equipped as a salesperson. I was more retiring. I was more introverted. I was more a one-to-one person. And so she was the outside person. She was highly creative. And we seriously did some damage together because I could keep that agency moving smoothly, and she was out selling. Daniela decides, I don't really want to be in an agency that has that kind of growth in it. And so she moved on. I bought her out, and I began with the firm to develop our skill sets over a long period of time. What the point of repetitive stuff is boring, and doing things that is self-actualizing is, I didn't really know anything about business. I knew how to raise money at the Denver Art Museum and the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and I knew how to plan, and I knew what creativity was all about, but what I didn't know was how to actually grow and have a business. So the realization was, here we have 4 employees and we have 16 employees, et cetera, and I'm this nonprofit. And it was like, well, if you don't make a profit, you are never going to be able to give anybody a raise. Simple as that. It didn't have to do with anything but what kind of place were we going to be? Were we going to be a place where you could actually grow and thrive and people could thrive in this kind of environment? Or were we going to be a kind of an agency that dwindles like this, produces hellaciously good creative ideas, and has super kinds of clients, but the people that work there for their heart, but they never actually get to take care of their families. And so that was my big realization of changing from that one world into that other world. And I gotta say, it's an enormous amount of responsibility when you make that kind of move in your life particularly, well, I wasn't too young. I was like 39 by the time that was starting to happen. We were so successful, however, that we moved to a real office. At the entry of our real office, the Siena Square building was very snazzy. We had these black and white, but that's our shoe collection. It was the beginning of a female shoe collection. It was the beginning of taking and building reputation from brand. So the concept of thriving, not just surviving, came for me from beginning then to be able to say, this is the kind of organization we could be. This is the kind of person who could work with us. I didn't even know. I thought, oh, maybe I should hire somebody that I don't like or I don't connect with because they have different kinds of ideas from me. Well, the thing you know when you really are responsible is if you hired a values and you hired somebody coming in who wants the same mission that you have, that is unassailable. That is something that from a talent explosion makes everything happen because you're coming from values. So starting to think about how to thrive after you've survived. Making sense out of survival was figuring out how do I take care of those forecasts and how do I do all those business kinds of things. But thriving was how do I do these kinds of things. So we moved the agency to Denver because we moved the agency to Denver because I couldn't get enough people to drive to Boulder. And the first time I got it wasn't called a cell phone, it was a car phone. I had a car phone. And I drove all over the place, all over the Front Range. I drove, when I was going to Boulder, 80,000 miles in like 26 months or something. And I knew that highway back, and you had dead spots for your phone, et cetera. My first phone bill was $1,800 for that phone. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, nobody told us that it was like the minutes. So, and nobody told us there was a plan. I mean, the thing was huge. They called them shoe phones, like, get smart. So anyway, so we eventually got ourselves always carrying the shoe collection, and then we started with, we didn't have any money to buy furniture, right? So I thought, okay, I talked to a friend of mine, she was a curator and she'd became interior design consultant. So I called Barbara up on the phone. I said, Barbara, I have a little money, I need to move into a new office, I need to buy furniture. What do I do? So-and-so has some free cheap furniture for me. And she said, stop right there. We'll buy cheap desks and we'll start a chair collection. Because great design occurs by architects and designers who want to create furniture. So we'll get the best stuff that we could. Well, you could find mid-century modern furniture. You could find things by Charles and Ray Ames. You could find all of these great designers, Venturi, major architects who were just coming up and into being. And it's four legs on the. And you could find beautiful things. So that was the beginning. We had the shoe collection. And then we began the chair collection and the crappy desks. But you never saw the crappy desks because you saw the Charles and Ray Ames or the Penton chair or just these incredible kinds of architectural, beautiful concepts. Anyway, so we moved the agency to Denver, got the chair collection, I got the shoe collection. We had eyeglass collections, we had postcard collections. We had collections that were concepts of curation. Because every creative person is thinking about this, not that, this, not that. You do it all the time in your jobs. I'm eliminating this in order to focus on that and make that the most beautiful or most enticing thing. So developing a culture around that is absolutely critical. So one of the things that we would do would be to have events and activities. So at this moment in time, which would be the mid-90s, we developed the first annual McQuick Parade, which was the world's shortest St. Patrick's Day parade. And I'm going to, at the end, tell you a little bit about that. But the parade, when we first started it, we went around the block. That was farther than we intended. We were only going to go 15 feet, and that always was the amount of the parade, and then we would be so compelled we'd go around the block. So we had a red flyer wagon, and we threw candy at people in Larimer Street. And that was our first annual McQuick Parade, a culture building activity. Right about the same time, however, do you view in your life that all things will go like this? Well, things don't go like that. I viewed that, I actually thought when I was 25 that I would live forever. I absolutely believed that. And so I always thought my life would be like that. So what happened was, we bought a house in Belcaro. We had a dog. I had bought a building, and we lost our two major major clients, all in one kind of tiny little period. And my dad died. And my dad, when I was paying Daniela off, was the kind of man who didn't have any money. The most he ever made in his life was $11,000, 5 kids in our family. We all got to college. He called me on the phone, and this is the kind of man he was. He said, "I've saved one of your payments so that if you get in trouble, I will give you this payment." And I'm like, I am never taking that payment. It was like the most motivating thing. Well, we lose the clients. I had never laid anybody off. I had never asked anyone to leave. I had no experience with that. I felt like we were all family. And so I thought, I've got to hang on. So Keystone was one of the clients, and Rocky Mountain News was the other. A lot of you probably don't even know about the Rocky Mountain News, but we had these two clients, and it wasn't from any fault of ours. One got sold, the other one had a new VP marketing come in, who I don't like. And so we lost those clients, and it was the core of the business. I was so frightened. I cannot tell you how frightened I was. And what ultimately happened was, I always was, in our whole group, we always were selective about who we worked with, or we wanted to be selective, even though it was a hard business. But I had to take whatever business could keep the wheels on. And so we worked, and when you work with the clients that aren't so great, they're not nice. I always got money up front, so I didn't have to worry about that part. And I really did. I was very disciplined about that, because a not nice person will sometimes stiff you. And I wasn't about to have that ever happen to us, because I was responsible for these people and their families. So anyway, we kind of pulled ourselves back. We had McQuick parades. We had this culture kind of growing, and the economy started to help us. So pretty soon we're starting to add Excel Energy and Red Robin Restaurants and a range of really solid kinds of clients. For 15 years I had worked on Quest. I wanted to work with Quest, CenturyLink, whatever they're called now. And I wanted that client, and it took relationship. So just kind of working, and things started to explode. But the culture building activities were the things, because it got harder and harder, and business changed faster and faster. So the McQuick became kind of a core for where we were headed, which is past survival into self-actualizing and then into thriving. So the agency had started to grow incrementally, and I was struggling with that, because I needed to have people smarter than me, but that meant I had to trust them enough in order for that smartness to occur. And we began the growth, and at a point where we had bought a building at 1440 Blake, and across the street was barbed wire and graffiti. It was right after the ballpark opened, or right before the ballpark opened, and so nobody knew what was going to happen in Lodo. So that was where the McQuick parade first happened. As we grew in the 90s, then we started looking for another property, and this was 2340 Blake, which we found. And as you can see, what's kind of fun is it didn't have sidewalks. It was a true warehouse. It had plumbing supplies in it, and we dreamed that could be our building. And we were up to 90 people, and I thought, okay, we'll hang ourselves out there and we'll buy this building. It had 100 parking places. It was in a very, at 24th and Blake, stuff had not yet happened down there. So we thought, well, maybe that would be a really good decision. This was in the Denver Post. That's what it looked on the inside. And that's this hopeful girl, that little person saying, this is what we could be in this fairly burned out kind of property. And this is what we ultimately were able to begin to put together. Excuse me, I need to be in your way. And that's the kind of environment. So do you see the shoes are still in the, so the continuity over time and the continuity, we have an art collection of photography, a beautiful kind of work environment. It was on 2 floors. That's looking down to a lower floor. This was an area where we had a central atrium area, and we carried on some of the same concepts that were from the original buildings. The yellow from the little yellow house as starters. Our color palette always kind of stayed the same. And I'm going to go back to here. So in the culture building period, which is thriving period, I would call it, this is the period where we began thinking about giving. And the agency had already always donated services. For 10 years, we donated our services to the Denver Zoo. The Identity, Denver Zoo, we developed their color palette, all their advertising. We advertised their poop from the, it was called Zoop, from the zoo animals. We just have a wonderful time. We did that with the Dumb Friends League. So we were very, always doing things that would help organizations that we knew and loved, but we didn't do giving well. And so United Way, we loved United Way, and we tried to get the giving kind of contribution programs going, et cetera. And we came up with a concept, I want you to just think about that space, called the Global Do-Good Grant, the McLain Finlon Global Do-Good Grant. And the McLain Finlon Global Good Grant, the Global Do-Good Grant, was a fabulous idea of our executive team to how engage us in the world. And so every creative person on the staff, or every person on the staff, everyone was creative, could apply anonymously through a presentation that they would make to an executive team to go anywhere in the world, all expense paid by McLain Finlon, and do good, do some good. And so they would make the case of what that do good would be all about. And then we would give them dollars also to invest while they were there. And then they would only have one requirement, and that was to come back to everyone at McLain Finlon and make a presentation using all of their creative skills on what occurred in that experience wherever they went. So the first year we had someone go to Romania and work in an orphanage. We had, we went to Tanzania, we went then ultimately to Rwanda. And many of you know what Rwanda is all about. And so Rie, who was a Japanese young woman who worked for us, she had made this presentation to go to Rwanda. And so what happened was, I want to go back there. Everyone was quite taken with this, and her presentation was really good to go. And so we decided that, the staff decided they wanted to raise more money to give to Rie, to give to the people of Rwanda. And so one of our guys, our reception guys, had grew his hair into a giant afro. And he let it grow for months, and then his salon boyfriend, we were going to put a chair in the middle of the atrium area on the bottom floor and shave his head. And while we were shaving his head, his salon partner was doing this in the barber chair, we would throw money at, and as long as it took to shave the hair, that's how much money was going to. So that's what we did in that particular area. It made no sense, but It was not what I knew at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It was the McClain Finlon Global Do-Good Grant. So we raised $2,000. So Rie comes back, makes her presentation on, of course, the great sadness of Rwanda, but also about the orphanage where she went to work. And she had taken her $2,000, and the first thing that she bought were little yellow outfits so the kiddos could go to school. Then she bought crayons and writing materials. And then she bought a dozen goats. And so they show this picture of everybody in the Rwanda village dancing with the goats as they put them into the orphanage car, which happened to be a Mercedes, go figure, and putting all the goats in the car and then off. And then the final thing she was able to buy was a water tank, because they had no way to have their water fresh. And I mean, that was giving and cultural giving at its highest level. It was an amazing, for me, an amazing full moment for the agency to have entered into that zone of creativity and depth of values that made all our consumerism that we worked on and all of those kinds of things have real meaning as the organization grew. Want to go, and that was, by the way, the poster that was part of her presentation. And I mean, these things got really creative and beautiful and wonderful presentations. This is you can't see this very well, but it's Hickenlooper. And that's the 10th annual McQuick Parade. And we always have proclamations from the mayor that we would read. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Mayor's Proc, but they go on and on and on and on. So we'd have bullhorn and we'd go on and on and on. And now our McQuick parades, the world's shortest St. Patrick's Day parade for busy corporate execs, was 15 feet long, and we made floats. We had a king and a queen. Sometimes the king was or the queen was a queen. No, the queen was a guy who was a queen. And sometimes they were, and we would always publicize this. Year 9, we did have a bit of a disaster. We got a Vespa from down the way, and the king and the queen jumped on the Vespa, and they were supposed to start the parade. We had the horse police, because we needed to have good relationships with the police down there. We had the motorcycle police, we had the car police, we have the marching band, the kilts, everything like that. I mean, everything has grown from the red wagon to this like great presentation. They get onto the Vespa, rev it up, and run into a car. Well, all of this is being filmed. So we were on CNN because we were the world's shortest St. Patrick's Day parade for busy corporate execs. We marched 15 feet and crashed. But anyway, this was the 10th annual McQuick, and John Hickenlooper came to actually witness it. So then we start walking down the street. The horse police are in front, the convertibles, the people walking in there as their floats, because sometimes the floats were like a sofa, and everybody jumped on the sofa and you push it down the street. It was just hilarious. And Hickenlooper is walking. Oh, and see, we walk 15 feet, but then we're always compelled to go around the block. So we go 15 feet with Mayor Hickenlooper. We march down, we get to 24th and Blake, and all the traffic is stopped. We march through the traffic. He said, "Do you have a permit?" We're like, "Not." He said, "Do people get bothered?" "No." So we walked around the block, he left, and went on. But that was the beginning of the 10th annual McQuick Parade. So I want to just go then to know yourself, and then I'll conclude, and I'd love to hear questions from you or anything. So by 2007 or 8, I've been through 5 downturns. And the 5th downturn would be 2008. And I was 62. And I had schlepped a portfolio since the very beginning. I knew what I always needed to do. And so what happened was, entering into that downturn, we had a client change of a massive nature. And I could see it coming, and I had wanted to retire for like 3 years, and I had a game plan. This is all the stuff I'm going to do when I retire, because I'm a planner. And so I had this plan that I was going to, go to art school, and I was going to practice the piano more, and I was going to read more books, and we were going to travel more, et cetera. But the downturn starts to happen, and everything starts to blow apart. We lose a client. And I don't know, some of you are even young for what that felt like, but it was like a hatchet, went through everything. It was swift. The money that you saved, you had 30% less or 40% less, even if you were a wise investor. So I was extremely concerned, because at the same time, we were an idea factory. And we were really focused on traditional advertising media. And we really were good at that. And the internet was coming up like that. And that's much more of a math. At that juncture, it was much more of I would call it a math approach. It was more units and less concept. And so our whole environment was set up for a certain kind of business. And so what happened was I started thinking about what it is that in life did I have to give at that moment in time. We lost this big client, we were going to have to do layoffs, and I started thinking about cycles, and that there are these cycles when repetitions occur, that where you are finished with them, and it's time to think about the next phase. And I thought, I love my agency, I love every aspect of what we have done. I'm proud of it. I love our people. I love the kind of skill sets we have. I love what we've accomplished. I love it. But I did not have the energy to do the business things I would need to do in order to continue the agency. So I thought, this is my moment. This is my moment where I must choose, because if I stay in there and I don't want to do it, you know how you get up and you don't want to do something, you don't do it. You think about doing it, but you don't do it. And for me, it would have been pounding that pavement. For everyone who worked with me, it would be living with that kind of fear. And I thought, I can't do that. I don't have that in me any longer. I don't have it for this moment. I need to conclude. And I was so sad. I just can't tell you how sad I was. And I was very, very sad about it. So, but I had been on the board of the Denver Art Museum for a number of years. I wound down the agency. I retired. We sold the building. It was like saying, there's a chapter in our life. We helped our people get really good jobs in this market just right before it became difficult. So they're everywhere and in wonderful positions. And then, I just started thinking about, what do I do next? Because in the first 3 months I had done my plan. I wasn't going to practice piano anymore than before. And I wasn't going to go to more art classes. And I wasn't going to, I could do it, but I really liked the teamwork and being around people and driving stuff. And so the art museum called, and that's the first time I started working back in nonprofit and being able to use the service business mentality that I had. So I went and worked in the Denver Art Museum as president during transition to Christoph Heinrich. I could take the business practices that I had learned for 25 years and fix those things that I didn't like when I was there a long time ago. And we did. We had more transparent information about the money. We made sure people had really good plans. We started finding ways to have revenue flow without while you were sleeping, things like that. And so I did that for 3 years as part of a cycle, and then I moved on into helping Steve here with History Colorado, and now I'm interim, these are volunteer, interim CEO at Denver Scholarship Foundation, where we give scholarships to all low-income kids to go to college in Colorado, all low-income kids in DPS. So we give, right now we have 1,700 scholarships each year that we're providing, and then they're matched $2 for every $1. So it's a really wonderful organization. So I just want to, the point about the last stage of this is knowing oneself, knowing what makes you tick, knowing when the walk away is, and going back almost to that place of this person that we are, going back to that person and saying, what is it? What is that opportunity? What is that stopping place? What is that thing where you go, wham, I'm not doing that. That's what I think knowing yourself is all about. So to conclude, pioneering and working through the women, I mean, I had people who said they wouldn't work with me because they're woman-owned business. There's always somebody else. So pioneering is really about ambition, coming from within yourself, knowing yourself, and kind of working through all of the ups and downs of everything. So I appreciate you asking me to speak to you, and I hope that it is something in sharing with you that it is fortifying for these more tumultuous times where 68 was kind of havoc, and now is just something different that makes you need to find your way in a really special manner that's unique to yourselves. So thank you for asking me to be here.